November 2024. Rheinmetall announces record profits. The Leopard 2A8 rolls off the assembly line. 66.5 tons of German precision engineering. But if you open up the transmission, you'll find something astonishing. The fundamental Synchromesh technology dates back to 1942. ZF Friedrichshafen, gear factory. The name literally means gear factory. For 84 years, no NATO nation has paid a single euro in licensing fees. Today, I'm going to show you the documented technical lineage from the Panther factory in Friedrichshafen to every modern main battle tank in the Western world. Buckle up. This story will surprise you. Let me show you something. 1942, a factory on Lake Constance, ZF Friedrichshafen faces an impossible task. The new Panther tank needs a transmission that can move 45 tons at 34 miles per hour. The problem? No existing transmission can handle that load at that speed. The engineers under Ferdinand Porsche and Mayenne had developed an engine, the Maybach HL230, 700 horsepower, 12 cylinders, gasoline-powered, a monster of an engine. But without a transmission to transfer that power to the tracks, the engine is useless. ZF accepts the challenge. What they develop will change the tank industry forever. The ZF AK-7200, 7 forward gears, 1 reverse gear, but the revolutionary thing wasn't the number of gears. It was the synchronization. Imagine 1942. Tank drivers had to double clutch when shifting gears. Every gear change took seconds. In combat, those seconds could be deadly. A T-34 driver needed 4 to 5 seconds for a gear change. The Sherman needed 3, but the Panther with the ZF transmission under a second. ZF solved this problem with an elegant solution. Synchro rings, brass alloy with a precise coefficient of friction. The gears were brought to the same speed before engagement. No more double clutching, 1 lever, 1 smooth transition. The technical specifications were impressive. Maximum torque of 1,200 Newton meters, transmission efficiency of 96%, weighing only 1,653 pounds for a transmission of this performance class. That was unheard of in 1942. For comparison, the American M4 Sherman used a Synchromesh transmission with only 5 gears. Maximum torque 650 Newton meters. Efficiency 89%. The German transmission was technically a generation ahead. The Soviets had it even worse. The T-34 used a crash gearbox. No synchronization. Drivers needed weeks of training just to shift gears. In sub-zero temperatures, shifting became torture. Some T-34 drivers used hammers to move the gear lever. But the ZF AK-7200 had another secret. The steering in the Panther. The transmission was directly connected to the manned single-radius steering system. 2 levers. Pulling a lever slowed the corresponding drive wheel. The tank turned. Simple. Precise. A driver could steer the 45-ton Colossus with 2 fingers. The Tiger I used a different system. The Maybach Olvar OG40 12-16. 8 forward gears, 4 reverse gears. Semi-automatic, hydraulically controlled, more complex, more expensive, harder to maintain. But here's where it gets interesting. The Ordnance Office tested both systems. Proof 6 compared the ZF AK-7200 with the Maybach Olvar for the Tiger II. The results? The Maybach offered better driving characteristics under extreme loads. The hydraulic control was smoother. But the ZF system was more reliable, less complex hydraulics, simpler maintenance in the field, fewer failures. In a war where every tank counted, reliability was gold. The decision fell on the Maybach for the Tiger II, but the ZF remained in the Panther, and the Panther was built in larger numbers. 6,200 ZF AK-7200 transmissions were produced by the end of the war, every single one manufactured in Friedrichshafen, until April 1944. That month, everything changed. Allied bombers hit the Maybach factory. Production outage for several months. Then they hit Zef. The gear factory was severely damaged. Hundreds of workers died. The production lines lay in ruins. Panther production stalled, not because of missing hulls, not because of missing turrets, because of missing transmissions. The ZF AK-7-200 was so critical that its loss paralyzed the entire tank production. But here's where the real story begins. May 1945, American troops reach Friedrichshafen. The town on Lake Constance is strategic. Zeppelin, Maybach, Dornier, and ZF, all originally subsidiaries of Luftschiffbau Zeppelin GmbH. All with technology the Allies wanted. The Americans know exactly what they're looking for, and they find it. In the cellars of the ZF factory are complete technical drawings, patent applications, test reports, metallurgical analyses, manufacturing instructions, quality control procedures, everything you need to rebuild the most advanced tank transmission in the world. The Americans load truckloads, crate after crate, thousands of documents, photographs, samples, prototypes. Operation Paperclip begins. But ZF engineers weren't the primary target. Werner von Braun and the rocket scientists took precedence. The transmission experts came later, quieter, less documented. What we know. At least 12 ZF engineers were brought to the USA. Their names don't appear on any public paperclip lists. They didn't work for NASA. They worked for the Army, for the armor, for the development departments in Detroit and Indianapolis. And here it gets really interesting. 1950, the U.S. Army begins development of a new medium tank, the M48 Patton, the transmission, a CD850 from Allison. But look at the specifications. Synchronized gears, brass alloys, friction coefficients that are suspiciously similar. The fundamental architecture, identical to the ZF concept. The arrangement of the gears, copied. The oil channels, copied. The synchro rings, copied. No patent cited. No licensing fee paid. Douglas O'Regan describes it in his book, Taking Nazi Technology. The Allies assembled teams of experts who combed through defeated Germany. They searched for industrial secrets. They seized documents from patent applications to factory production data. They interviewed, hired, and sometimes abducted hundreds of scientists and engineers. The greatest technology transfer in history. That's what O'Regan calls it. And he's right. But Germany wasn't the only target, and the Americans weren't the only hunters. Operation Osoaviakhim, October 22, 1946. The Soviets, they had a different method, not voluntary recruitment. Systematic deportation, mass abduction. 2,200 German engineers, 6,000 family members, 92 freight trains, snatched from the Soviet occupation zone in a single night, without warning, without explanation, just gone. Among them, gear experts, metallurgists, precision mechanics, tool makers, quality control specialists, the entire expertise of an industry on a train. Where did they go? To Gorky, to Chelyabinsk, to Nizhny Tagil, to the Soviet tank factories, under guard, without rights, as prisoners, forced to work. And what did these factories produce starting in 1947? The T-44, the precursor to the T-54. With an interesting detail, the transmission was suddenly better, more reliable. Synchronization was working. Gear changes were faster. No Soviet patent explains this leap. No Soviet research documents the development. No Soviet invention justifies the progress. But in Gorky, German engineers were working. Former gear factory employees, former Maybach experts, and they brought their knowledge with them. 1954, the T-54 enters mass production. It becomes the most produced tank in history. over 100,000 units. In variations that are still in use today, the T-55, the T-62, the line only ends with the T-72, and in every single one, a German transmission concept, hidden, unmentioned, but present. But let's go back to the West. 1956, West Germany establishes the Bundeswehr. Germany needs tanks again, but not American ones, their own. German tanks for German soldiers. The decision is made quickly. The new German tank must have the best in the world, the best engine, the best armor, and the best transmission. And who builds the best transmissions? Gear Factory, the same company, at the same location, with some of the same engineers, the survivors. 1965, the Leopard 1 rolls off the assembly line. Its transmission, the Gear Factory 4HP250, 4 forward gears, 2 reverse gears, fully synchronized, the direct evolution of the AK-7-200, the same principles, the same philosophy, the same German precision. The irony is painful. Germany had to buy back its own technology, not physically, but conceptually. Gear Factory had survived, but the patents, the research results, the test data, all of it had been confiscated in 1945. What Gear Factory built in 1965 was based on concepts that were already in American and Soviet tanks. Germany had lost its own technology and had to reinvent it, with the same people who had originally invented it. And here comes the turning point, 1970, the MBT-70 project. A joint German-American main battle tank. The idea was ambitious. The reality was chaos. Too many cooks, too many ideas, too many compromises. The project failed. But one result remained. The Renk HSWL 354 transmission, developed for the MBT-70, used in the Leopard 2, Renk, another German company, another subsidiary of the Gear Empire, and its transmission. It's the direct evolution of the Gear Factory philosophy. The same engineers, the same principles, only more modern. Look at the specifications: fully synchronized gears, hydrodynamic torque converter, integrated steering system, electronic control. The basic architecture, invented in Friedrichshafen in 1942, only refined. The Leopard 2 becomes the most successful Western main battle tank, exported to 19 countries, over 3,600 units built, from Turkey to Canada, from Spain to Singapore. But nobody pays royalties to the original inventors. Because there are no original inventors anymore, only companies that build on confiscated patents. And the USA, the M1 Abrams, 1980, the most advanced vehicle of its time, the main weapon, a Rheinmetall 120mm smoothbore gun, German design, licensed under the designation M256 for the gun. The US paid royalties. Rheinmetall existed. Rheinmetall had lawyers. Rheinmetall could negotiate. Rheinmetall had rights that had not been confiscated. But the transmission, an Allison X1100 3B American, built on concepts that were taken from Germany in 1945, no royalty, no thank you, no recognition. And here it gets philosophical. What is intellectual property worth when the owners disappear, when patents are confiscated, when engineers are deported, when companies are destroyed? The answer? Nothing. It's worth nothing. It doesn't exist anymore. For the victors of World War II, German intellectual property was war booty, intellectual reparations. That's what they called it officially, as if knowledge was a resource you could just take. O'Regan documents it precisely. The technology transfer included almost every field of industrial technology and academic science in occupied Germany, from chemistry to physics, from mechanical engineering to electronics, from medicine to metallurgy. It was probably the largest technology transfer in history. But what did the Allies pay for it? Nothing, zero, zip. 84 years later, nothing has changed. Every Leopard 2A8 that rolls off the assembly line today carries German transmission concepts from 1942. The Renk HSWL 354 is the direct descendant of the Gear Factory AK-7 200. Every M1 Abrams uses synchronization principles that German engineers perfected before the war. Every T-90M of the Russian army is based on transmission concepts that deported Germans brought to Soviet factories after 1946. 350,000 tanks worldwide, at least, all with genetic DNA from Friedrichshafen. And what did Germany get for it? Let me show you the numbers. 1945 to 1950, confiscated, intellectual reparations. Value according to American estimates at the time, $10 billion. In today's currency, over 150 billion euros. What of that went to Gear Factory? Nothing. What of that went to German engineers? Nothing. What of that went to the families of the deported experts? Nothing. The German engineers who were deported to Russia only returned in the 1950s, without compensation, without recognition. Many died there, from cold, from hunger, from exhaustion. But that's not the end of the story. It's the beginning. Because the technology didn't stop evolving, and the lines became even more complex. 2024. Ukraine is fighting. Leopard 2A4s and 2A6 are being delivered. They're fighting against T-72s and T-80s. Both sides are using transmission concepts that were invented in Germany. The irony is bitter. German technology is fighting German technology. Soldiers are dying on both sides. And no one remembers Friedrichshafen. But let's take a closer look. The Leopard 2A6 in Ukraine. Its Renk HSWL 354 transmission transfers 1,500 horsepower to the tracks. Maximum speed, 45 miles per hour. That's impressive. But you know what? The 1943 Panther achieved 34 miles per hour with 700 horsepower. Proportionally speaking, the efficiency has barely improved. The physics are the same, only the materials are better. The basic physics are identical: synchronized gears, hydrodynamic coupling, integrated steering. What Gear Factory invented in 1942 is still the standard today, after 84 years. And that is the problem. Technology evolves, but the legal basis remains unchanged. The patents from 1942 have long expired. The engineers are dead. The companies exist in altered forms. Who is supposed to demand royalties today? And from whom? Gear Factory Friedrichshafen still exists. A global corporation with 150,000 employees. They build transmissions for BMW, Mercedes, Porsche, but no longer for tanks. Renk has taken over that market, also German, also with roots in the wartime era. And both companies, they have accepted the past. What happened in 1945 happened, but should we accept that too? The question isn't just historical, it's current. 2023. Turkey wants to build its own main battle tank, the Altay. They are negotiating with South Korea for technology transfer. The Koreans want money. Lots of money. Hundreds of millions of dollars. Why? Because they want to protect their technology. Because they know what intellectual property is worth. Because they have learned. The Germans knew that in 1942 too. But they had no choice. They lost the war. And with it, everything. And here comes the central realization. War doesn't just destroy people. It destroys intellectual property. It destroys rights. It destroys generations of research and development. It destroys knowledge. What Gear Factory built up in 20 years was confiscated in a single month. What German engineers perfected their whole lives was deported to the east in 92 freight trains, and the world benefits from it to this day. But let me show you something else. The technical lineage isn't just German, it's global. 1942, Gear Factory develops synchro rings made of brass alloy. That's the beginning. 1945, American teams confiscate all the documents. 1948, Soviet engineers begin analyzing German transmissions. 1955, General Motors adopts the concept for the Allison CD850. 1960, the Morozov Design Bureau in Kharkiv develops the T62 transmission based on German concepts. 1965, Gear Factory builds the 4HP 250 for the Leopard 1, based on its own old patents. 1970, Renk develops the HSWL 354 for the MBT-70 project. 1980, the M1 Abrams uses the Allison X1100 3B, an American advancement of German concepts. 1990, the Soviet Union's T-72B is modernized, with transmission concepts that deported Germans developed. 2000, the Leopard 2A5 gets improved electronics. The basic transmission remains. 2010, the M1A2 SEP V2 retains the same transmission concept, only the software changes. 2024, the Leopard 2A8 and the M1A2 SEP V4 both use technology that dates directly back to 1942. The lineage is unbroken, 82 years, from Friedrichshafen to every corner of the world. And no one has ever paid. If you value these technical truths and would like to support my research, then please use the Super Thanks function below this video. Every contribution helps me to continue documenting these forgotten stories. But back to the question. What was German intellectual property worth? The answer depends on who you ask. For the Americans, it was spoils of war, legitimately confiscated. They had won. Everything belonged to them. For the Soviets, it was reparations, lawfully deported. Germany had killed millions of Soviet citizens. That was only fair. For the Germans, it was loss, irretrievably taken, with no hope of return. But for the world, for the 350,000 tanks that are driving around today, it was the cornerstone, the DNA, the genetic code of the modern tank industry. Without Gear Factory, no Leopard. Without German engineers, no T-54. Without confiscated patents, no M1 Abrams. The history of tank transmissions is a history of technology transfer, but it's also a history of loss, of theft, of exploitation. Germany didn't just lose the war. It lost its technological identity, at least for a generation. What Gear Factory builds today is based on concepts that Gear Factory itself no longer owns. The patents are in the public domain, the research is public, the secrets are no longer secrets. But the moral question remains. Should Germany have been paid? Should the engineers have been compensated? Should the families of the deported have received reparations? History says no. The winners write the rules, the losers accept. But the technology says yes. Every transmission that works in a NATO tank today is a silent testament to German engineering, a mute proof of what was taken. And that leads us to another aspect, one that is rarely discussed: materials science. The Gear Factory AK-7200 wasn't just a mechanical marvel, it was also a metallurgical one. The Germans had developed alloys that no one else could produce. The synchro rings, made of a special brass alloy, 62% copper, 35% zinc, 3% aluminum. This composition resulted in a friction coefficient of exactly 0.2, perfect for synchronization. The Americans took years to imitate this alloy. Their first attempts had a friction coefficient of 0.08, too low. The gears slipped, The Soviets had even bigger problems. Their metallurgy wasn't at that level. The T-34, therefore, had a crash gearbox. Not because the Soviets wanted it that way, but because they couldn't produce better alloys. That only changed with German experts in Gorki. The metallurgists from Gear Factory brought their formulas with them, their secrets, their alloys. From 1948, the Soviet Union was able to produce synchro rings. The T-44 got a better transmission. The T-54 an even better one. The genetic lineage is clear, but it goes even further, the gears themselves. Gear Factory used a special hardening process, case hardening with carbon. The surface became hard, the core remained tough. A gear could withstand millions of load cycles. The American gears from 1945 lasted 100,000 load cycles. The German ones, over 1 million units produced, 10 times more durable, 10 times more reliable. And what did the Americans do? They copied the process directly from the seized documents. Today, case hardening is standard in the industry. Nobody remembers where it came from. But let me show you something else. Something that's not in any history book. The story of Harold Miller. Miller was a leading engineer at Gear Factory. From 1942 to 1945, he worked on the AK-7-200. He was the man who perfected the Synchromesh. His name is on 3 patents. May 1945. The Americans arrive. Miller is interrogated. His documents are confiscated. His patents are copied. October 1946. The Soviets take him. Operation Osoaviakhim. A train eastward. His family is not allowed to come. Miller works for 5 years in Gorki. He develops transmissions for the T-44, for the T-54. His knowledge flows into Soviet tanks. In 1951, he's allowed to return. A broken man. His wife has remarried. His children don't recognize him. His career is over. Miller dies in 1967, impoverished, forgotten, without recognition, but his legacy lives on, in every T-72, in every T-90, in every Russian tank unit fighting in Ukraine today. That's the human side of technology, the side nobody wants to see. And Miller was not alone. Hundreds of engineers shared his fate. Their names are forgotten. Their contributions are anonymous. But their technology lives on. Let me give you another example. The steering system of the Panther, developed by man in collaboration with Gear Factory, a single radius system. The tank could rotate around a fixed point, simple, effective, revolutionary. The Sherman didn't have such a system. It needed more space to turn. In narrow streets, that was a problem. In cities, a death sentence. After the war, all NATO tanks adopted the German steering concept, the M48 Patton, the M60, the Leopard 1 and 2, the M1 Abrams. All with single radius steering, all based on German patents. And the Soviets, the T-54 also had a single radius system, developed in Gorki. With German engineers, the convergence is not a coincidence. It's the result of systematic technology transfer from Germany in both directions, westward and eastward. But let's get to another point, one that is relevant today. The Leopard 2A8, the latest model, presented in 2024. What has changed? The engine is stronger. 1,500 horsepower instead of 700. The armor is better. Composite armor instead of steel. The electronics are modern. Fire control system, GPS, night vision, but the transmission, the Renk HSWL 354, is fundamentally unchanged. Synchronized gears, hydrodynamic converter, integrated steering, the same philosophy as in 1942, only with better materials. Why? Because physics doesn't change. Gears work today as they did 84 years ago. Torque is torque. Friction is friction. The fundamentals are eternal. What Gear Factory perfected in 1942 was not a temporary solution. It was the optimal solution, the best way to build a tank transmission, and it still is. That's the true legacy of Friedrichshafen, not just copied technology, but timeless engineering, solutions that outlast generations. But here comes the bitter truth. Gear Factory got nothing for it. No recognition, no royalties, no compensation. What they invented in 1942 belongs to the world today. Their patents have expired, their engineers are dead, their secrets are public. That's the reality of intellectual property in the 20th century. The winners take, the losers give, and history forgets. But we should not forget, because if we forget the past, we also lose the lessons it contains. And the lesson here is clear. Technology doesn't belong to anyone permanently. What is secret today will be copied tomorrow. What is patented today will become public domain tomorrow. What is revolutionary today will become standard tomorrow. Gear Factory didn't know that in 1942. They thought their patents would protect them. Their secrets would remain secret. Their inventions would belong to them. The war taught them something different. And that brings us back to the beginning. November 2024. Rheinmetall is making record profits. The Leopard 2A8 rolls off the assembly line. But if you look closely, you see more than just a modern battle tank. You see the shadows of Friedrichshafen, the ghosts of the engineers who worked there, the patents that were confiscated, the families that were deported, the lives that were destroyed. You see 84 years of history compressed into a transmission, and you see a question that nobody wants to answer. What would have happened if Germany had kept its technology? What would have happened if Gear Factory had received royalties? What would have happened if the engineers hadn't been deported? We will never know. What we do know is this: 350,000 tanks, 84 years, €0 in royalties. That's the legacy of Friedrichshafen. That's the legacy of the ZF AK-7-200. That's the legacy of a technology that changed the world. And nobody ever said thank you. But before I close, I'd like to make one last point: the future. In 2024, the German army plans to use the Leopard 2A8 as its main battle tank. 18 units have been ordered. More will follow. The unit price is over €20 million. Of those 20 million, about 2 million go to Renk for the transmission. That's a lot of money. But you know what? That money flows into further development, into research, into new materials, into better electronics, into the next generation. The Germans have learned from 1945. They protect their technology better now. They patent more aggressively. They license more carefully. Renk sells transmissions to Turkey, to South Korea, to Australia, and everyone pays royalties. Everyone signs contracts. Everyone respects intellectual property. That's the difference from 1945. Today there are rules. Today there are lawyers. Today there are international agreements. But the basis, the technical foundation, it still comes from Friedrichshafen, from 1942, from a time when nobody thought about intellectual property. And that brings me to the last question. What do we owe the inventors of the past? What do we owe the people who created the technology we use today? What do we owe those who were never paid? I have no answer. But I believe we should ask the question, because if we don't ask it, we forget. And if we forget, history repeats itself. The ZF AK-7-200 is more than just a transmission. It's a reminder, a memorial, a symbol for what technology truly means. People invent, nations steal, companies profit, and history forgets. But we should not forget. Let me know in the comments. Did you know about this connection? Did you know that German Gear Factory concepts are inside every modern tank? Do you think this is technology theft or legitimate spoils of war? I'm eager to hear your thoughts. And if you want to see more forgotten technology stories like this, then subscribe to this channel. New documentaries every day about German engineering and its influence on the modern world. Until next time.